Forks on the Road by Cary, Jensen. Prologue. It's dark and rainy, and it's going to stay like this for a while. I'm in my home office on Lake Houston, on the far eastern outskirts of Houston, Texas, and Hurricane Harvey just made landfall north of Corpus Christi last night. And, unlike most hurricanes, which come in huffing and puffing and creating ruin and heartache and then quickly moving inland to spread misery further, this one is predicted to just hang out, drenching a huge swath of Texas and Louisiana with rain. For 5 days. It's a very unusual weather pattern. Unprecedented, really. I find myself in an unusual position. I'm alone at home with nothing to do. It's too wet to work outside, which is what I usually do when I'm hanging around the house. I often have professional work to do, but not now. All of my work-related obligations have been met. I'm not the kind of person who can just crack open a beer and watch TV. I've got to be productive. So I think to myself, why not work on a book? There's a lot about this moment that's unprecedented. I mean, my being in my own office is something of a rarity, as I normally work on the road. My being home and alone is even more extraordinary. This might be the 4th time in 30 years of marriage that I've been home without my wife. She's up in Minneapolis visiting with her mother and brother, who, being disabled, need some looking after now and then. I was supposed to be up there in Minneapolis also, but then there was this hurricane lurking out there, and when you live on the Gulf Coast and a hurricane is in the forecast, other plans lose their priority. Several days ago, I canceled my flight to Minneapolis in order to prepare for the storm. I did my job, trailering boats and moving them to high ground, securing anything that wind or wave might want to move, and now I just have to wait it out. The fortunate thing, if there is anything fortunate about any hurricane, is that this one mostly means rain for my area. Though Harvey was a Category 4 hurricane when it came ashore last night in Rockport, a charming sport fishing village on the mid-Texas coast that did nothing to deserve the brutal punishment that it received, I am far outside of the windy zone. On the other hand, I'm on the eastern side, which is euphemistically referred to as the dirty side. That means rain, and in this case, lots of it. We're expecting as much as 4 feet of rain over the next 5 days. That means flooding. That means stay in your house, so long as you're out of flood danger. So here I am, alone, and contemplating what to do. I'm not kidding about the book thing. I love to write. It's my passion. Something that I would have never expected in my youth. It was with some shock that, when reading my high school yearbook a few years back, I found numerous references, from those who signed my yearbook, to my writing. Though I wrote a few poems in my youth, writing was not something that I remember doing much of. I was a musician, plain and simple. As far as I can remember, I wrote more music than prose. Nonetheless, some saw a writer in me. And writing I've done. Tons of it. Geez, by now I've written tens of millions of words of stuff, published more than 25 books, hundreds of magazine articles, but, and that's a really big but, for the most part, it's been technical writing about developing computer software. And I'm passionate about that too, but this book will be different. I'm thinking about bringing to life something I did some years back while I was on the road. I've had these 30 or so chapters sitting on my computer for years, just taking up disk space and doing nobody any good. It's time, I'm thinking, to do something with them. Bring them out into the daylight. Share them. It's now 7 days later. Harvey has finally moved on and the water level is still receding. At this time, as I reread this prologue, I have to laugh, or maybe just cry. It's now Friday, September 1st, and this is the first time that I've sat down and really tried to make some progress on this book since I wrote those initial naive paragraphs. It turns out, when you are in a state of heightened alertness, dealing with problems as they arise, and destruction is occurring all around, it's kind of hard to concentrate on something creative like writing. My first thoughts drift back to this past Tuesday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I had spent most of the day preparing for water in the house, which, fortunately, didn't happen. That morning I was on the phone with my neighbor, Kirk, who precipitated my urgency by declaring that he was preparing for water in the house, given that the lake had risen last night by almost 4 feet. His preparation involved moving some basic provisions to his garage, which is on somewhat higher ground. By this time, we'd done just about everything to prepare, and we were waiting for either the rain to stop or the water to continue its eerie creep towards our home's foundations. As we talked on the phone, I noticed something. A debris line had formed. Have you been in a flood? If you have, you know that a debris line is a big deal. It really only forms when the water level starts to go back down, even if it's just a little bit. As I sat there talking to Kirk, a clear debris line formed, and about this time it stopped raining. Sometimes these things happen, and they are the source of false hope, dashed expectations, a cruel twist of the knife. But this was not one of those times. The water level really was going down, and by the next morning it had dropped a foot. Mind, a foot isn't that much, given that the lake was still a whopping 9 feet higher than normal, and so many of my neighbors still had floodwaters in their homes, but I'll take it compared to the alternative. That debris line became a metaphor for this book. What gets washed up on your shore is often the flotsam of someone else's failings, along with your own. And that's the story I want to tell. I guess that's how you deal with this kind of stuff. And you either deal with it, or that debris line becomes a watermark that defines this part of your life. Getting back to the book, these chapters that I initially wrote those many years ago are part of what I, and my friend at the time, Rick, referred to as the quest. We thought it would be fun to turn our occasional lunches together into a series of stories, maybe even adventures. We would visit, systematically, though not exhaustively, restaurants in the town where I was providing consulting services, and to which Rick had only recently moved, and reflect on our experiences. But when I say our, I really mean my. Yes, this is a bit selfish, but I knew what I wanted to say, and I said it. If Rick wants to write his own version, he's welcome to do so. He still can if that's his calling. It's been nearly 10 years since the quest began and 6 since it ended. And while that might seem like the distant past, the warmth that the memory of it stirs in my soul reminds me how lucky I've been, and I'm grateful. Dear readers, here's my story.